9.1 is just around the corner and it's time to shift gears. We need to prepare and study what to expect, otherwise we might miss something important or even worse, fall behind. Today, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen to you by talking in depth about all the changes you need to know when it comes to playing Druid in 9.1. What Covenant is the best option, if any of the new legendaries are worthwhile, what Soulbinds are looking good, domination sockets and much more. First off, let's start with Covenants. Covenants haven't received almost any changes apart from Covenant legendaries being added. However, the side effects of 9.0 lasting for so long allowed for some VOW testing, and when Fir and Kirin druids look pretty unplayable, Necrowa druid is shaping up like a strong contender for very high key pushing. But that's about it. In raids, Night Fae is still better by a mile than everything else, and if you are not doing super high keys, thing like 23, 24s, then Night Fae is better in M+ as well. New legendaries and soulbinds. Personally, I was hoping that the legendaries for other Covenants would be absolutely broken to balance off the uselessness of the other Covenant abilities. But sadly, this didn't happen. However, the new Night Fae legendary is shaping up very nicely, putting Night Fae even further ahead in raids. It's called Celestial Spirits, and what it does is that it basically makes you convoke a 1-minute CD that casts only 6 spells instead of 12, but now has a harder chance to cast Foolish. I'm going to make a separate video on this legendary, how it works and how to play around it in the upcoming days, so stay tuned. As far as Soulbinds go, same thing, big topic, going to make a separate video covering all the new rows in depth, and we'll keep you updated from week to week on what's best as we progress through Sanctum of Domination. Rage state of Resto Druids. Hero meta is often defined around other heroes becoming weaker rather than a particular hero becoming stronger. And while the majority of the healing specs haven't seen any change, Holy Paladin and Disc Priest both received fairly big hits. So let's talk about what that means for us. I have covered this before in my previous video, but I'll likely touch on this again. The biggest change by far is Spiritual becoming a 90-second cooldown from 60 seconds. This is a big deal for all the heroes, but especially for druids for two reasons. Number one, Risco Priest is no longer mandatory at every single boss at higher levels of raiding, therefore a possible spot for druids to take. And number two, we'll be able to use our cooldowns earlier in the fight, possibly getting more usages and mainly of all better usages. And as a cooldown slash burst oriented hero, you can see how this is an insane change for druids. Think of all the fights in Castle Nafria where you had to hold your CDs for like a minute because of Spiritual. Hungarian, Zymox, Council, the list goes on. I would go as far to say that I can even see a possibility for a druid to be brought into the top 5 raiding scene if the last couple of bosses don't sweet priests. And that would mean a lot, as the majority of the game is community driven, and despite druids being very strong in 9.0, the community perception is that if it's not being played in Echo / Limit, it's an unplayable dogshit class that does 0 healing, which is simply far from being true. Holy Paladins also received some moderate damage nerfs, around 15%, but still remain number 1 at hero damage, so I don't think Paladin spots will free up at all. And you'll still very likely see 2 Holy Paladins on majority of bosses in Sanctum. TLDR, Resto Druids are in a very good spot going into 9.1, and if we see them in Race to World first, it's going to be huge. So, fingers crossed. Now, moving on to Mythic Plus, it's almost the same thing as raiding. We are already probably the second best hero in M+, however, by a mile behind Holy Paladin, which basically rep out anyone serious, and they either chose to play Holy Paladin or stop doing M+ altogether, like I did. The damage nerfs to Holy Paladin mean a lot more in M+. Sadly, they are still the best hero for M+, however, the gap is a lot smaller now. The Covenants in M+ for druids are still the same for the most part, but Necrowa druid is probably going to become the better Covenant at very high keys, where things live long enough for it to ramp up its damage. Think like 24s. As, unlike Paladins, it doesn't do too much burst, but has excellent consistent damage, which might come in handy if the Blizzard score overtakes Rated IO and Tyrannical score becomes a thing. Although, in a very similar vein, Mythic Plus is simply driven by community perception, so our best bet is hoping that someone takes the class to its limit and pushes a very high score with it. Gear and Domination sockets. Domination gear, what tier bonus we want, what sockets we want, etc. is a topic that needs a video on its own to properly explain, but what you should know for now is that every single domination gear piece is very valuable and you want to make damn sure that your legendaries are not in a slot of a domination piece. After progress is over, there's a chance 7 item levels will be better than a domination socket, but that's a far future from now, so I'm not going to talk about that. Here's a quick cheat sheet on how our gear is going to look like in 9.1 and where you want to have your legendary pieces if you want to optimize for performance. You can see that Domination gear is dictating all of our gearing options, and the new BOEs are on legs and wrists, and both have bad raiding stats. Keep in mind this list is not oriented towards the very top raiding scene, think like top 20, where you are likely to finish the raid before you drop multiple domination pieces, so buying both BOEs and crafting legendary on feet might be the better option in that case. For all the rest of us that are not billionaires and are not in top 20, you can safely craft the legendaries on the pieces I recommend, as you would have to be insanely unlucky to not get a domination socket piece drop before the end of progress. Also important note, 3 domination pieces drop from raid and other 2 are locked behind reputations. That being said, we are done for today. Last thing I would like to talk about is now that we have Sanctum, I have a lot of videos planned to upload, such as the new Nightfall Legendary Explained, Best Stormbinds in 9.1, our Heroic and Mythic Boss guides, and Domination Gear Explained in depth. So stay tuned and enjoy your day, and like always, if you have any questions, ask me in the comments down below, or you can catch me on the rest of the Discord. Cheers.